Everyone, this video is covering how to create really good design option sketches in response to design briefs. So I'd just like to take you through a few steps that will make your sketches really sharp and to communicate your ideas really well. So I have a design option that's being presented to me where I need to increase the amount of vegetables in a diet, and I'm just thinking about how can I do that. So I've thought about a pancake and about how I might do that. So I went out to my garden and looked in my pantry. I found a potato, some lovely tomatoes, last tomatoes of the season, and some herbs that are in my garden. So I've got some basil, I've got some lovely little basil flowers from my Greek basil, and some Italian parsley. And so I've decided to use these two vegetables and these herbs in response to the design brief challenge. And so that's great. I've thought about what I want to do, but I need to create a sketch that is going to communicate how I'm going to use them. And so the first thing I need to think about is, what am I going to do and how do I draw these things? So with the potato, I thought that I would shred this roughly and put it into the pancake so that it's almost like a rosti, which is a European pancake that is made out of potato. Obviously we've got a batter to work with, so I need to think about, so what is that going to look like? So when I'm drawing my design option sketches, I need to perhaps practice a little bit first to think about, so what would that look like? If I were to draw then the pancake, I wouldn't draw it with round edges like that. I'm looking for something that's more rustic and just formed. So my edges might be a little bit scruffy, a little bit rough, like that. That's going to show what I'm trying to do. So we've got to think about what we're trying to do. Now, my drawing is not exceptional, so anyone can do this. I also need to think about some of the other ingredients that I'm going to use. So I thought about the tomatoes, and I'm going to roast these in the oven. They're really nice, big, plump cherry tomatoes. So rather than roast them whole, I thought that what I would do is halve them, drizzle them with a bit of olive oil, salt and pepper, and just roast them down to really concentrate the flavour, make them really tasty and really yummy. So if that's what my intention is, I actually need to show that the tomato has been cut in half. And this is a really easy way to do that. So you can see I've drawn a really rough oval shape and just this little bit underneath to show, yes, there is something sitting under there. If I wanted to be really fancy, I could do some seeds, but maybe not. The herbs, well, we might come back to them later because I'm still not really sure about what I want to do. And the interesting thing about a design option sketch is you should not start it with, this is what I'm going to do. It's actually as you work through the drawing, the thinking, that you can start to think about, what if I tried doing this? What if I tried doing that? So with my herbs, I have lots of options. I could just use my herb as a flower garnish, and that would look really good. But I might also consider whether I would shred something like a large basil leaf. I also have these flowers, and would I use them or would I not? That could be really interesting. And also I have the Italian broadleaf parsley. I prefer that to the curly one. So what might I do with that? So those are the kind of considerations that we need to have. All right, so here's something I prepared a little bit earlier, and here's my sketch. Now, if you have a look, I hope you're noticing a few things. Firstly, the intent is that the pancake won't be thin. It's actually going to be quite thick. And so if you have a look, you can see that I've created a layer sitting underneath to actually show that there's some thickness of that pancake. A couple of other things that perhaps I can draw your attention to is the placement of the tomatoes. So if you have a look, I've put them in the middle of the pancake. In terms of what creates an interesting visual effect, that is something that's going to draw the eye into the pancake and really look interesting and attractive. I just want you to notice I've also given my design option sketch a name, Potato Pancakes with Roasted Tomato. Now you'll notice that the pancake sketch is at the bottom of the page, the heading is at the top. I'm leaving lots of room for annotation. We'll do that in a moment, but I want you to think about colour next. So with a pancake, it will be yellow, but it won't be yellow all over. Where the pancake batter is actually hitting the surface of the pan that it's cooking on, you would expect some browning. You would expect that there would be some interesting colouring happening. Also, if we're thinking about the tomato, if that's been roasted down, yes, it will be red, but would the skins maybe be a slightly different colour? Thinking about my herbs as well, green and red on the colour wheel are actually opposites, and they're really good ones to use because of the contrast that you create. And so it's interesting, isn't it, with food, that when we think about garnishes, that's a really good understanding to have. So I'm just going to take a moment now and colour those in, and I'll see you in a moment. So here is our finished sketch at this point, coloured in, but now what we need to do is to create some annotations. So annotations do more than one thing. So let's take a moment to just think about what those things are. In a design brief, part of your design sketch is a response to that challenge. And so your annotations need to explain how is this idea meeting that challenge. So my challenge was to use vegetables and to increase vegetable consumption. Your design brief might have a number. So if, for example, you must use 2 vegetables, I would need to explain how this sketch does that. So there are a couple of rules that are really worth remembering. The first is that all annotations are explanations, but you do need to show where that explanation is happening. So what you need to do is draw a line. Because it's easy to sometimes make mistakes, all lines drawn on a design sketch must be in grey lead. Why? Because if I make a mistake, I start again. And so, for example, if I'm thinking about the fact that I needed to use 2 ingredients, I would perhaps draw a line from the tomato and to the pancake, and in biro I would write, this uses potato in the pancake, this uses tomato as the topping, which meets the 2 vegetable requirements. So that's the first thing, is how does this sketch meet the design brief? But that's not all that an annotation can show. It also should show, what am I going to do with this ingredient? So let's go back to the tomatoes. You remember I talked about roasting them. And so I need to provide some kind of information about what I am going to do to the tomato. So my annotation here may be, I plan to split these tomatoes, drizzle them with olive oil, salt and pepper, and roast them for 10 minutes in the oven. So that's the what am I going to do. The other thing that I would suggest that you think about is the why. Why is it there in the first place? So let's look at my shredded herbs. Firstly, I need to know, what are those herbs? They're just green slashes at the moment. So an annotation for the herb might be, I'm using shredded basil, great, that identifies what it is, but why is it there? So green and red create this amazing contrast. And so my why might be I'm adding basil to really set off that beautiful roasted tomato. So that's the purpose of annotations. Just so that you remember when you're looking, how does it meet the design brief? What am I going to do to this ingredient? And why is it there? And just a reminder that all explanations are in blue or black pen. So that is the last thing that goes. It's interesting that as we sketch, sometimes that's something that we're thinking of in the background of our mind, and so it should be the last thing because we've really settled on what we want to say by that time. So we're just going to pause here for a moment, and I'm going to write in some annotations and we'll look again. Go. So here we have the completed design options sketch. You can see there's a name that explains what this pancake is going to be. You can see that there are some annotations here that discuss how this idea meets the design brief requirements, what we're going to do with the actual ingredients and why those ingredients are there. You can see that it's not beautifully drawn, but as long as it communicates the idea, that's quite adequate. And you can see that I've thought a little bit about, so what are the differences in colour? My colouring isn't super. If you're an art student, you'll know my rendering is not great, but it still communicates the idea. So hopefully that's helped you have a bit of an idea about how you can draw some amazing design option sketches. Thanks for watching.